Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 25th of June of 2023. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. First we're going to start with Evgeny Prigozhin. After we moved him from Rostov-on-Don to Belarus, we still haven't received any updates about him. Probably after a very difficult week he needed some vacation. I believe that in a day or two we're going to get some piece of information from him, so let's wait. Another interesting updates are coming from the Minister of Defense of Russian Federation, Sergei Shoigu, and the head of the Chief of General Staff of the Russian Federation, Valery Gerasimov. The sources are saying that who is very close to the President of Russian Federation, Putin, and they're saying that all these two persons will be replaced by other persons. For example, the Minister of Defense of Russian Federation, Shoigu, will be replaced by the governor of Tula region. This is a very experienced person. He's ex-officer, and also he has experience in the running of a region, entire region. So basically he has experience either in military sphere and economical and finance sphere as well, and he will replace the Sergei Shoigu. And if it's true, of course, we will replace the icon on the map and we will move Sergei Shoigu to the history. Another interesting update is about Valery Gerasimov, the general staff. The sources are saying that this person will be replaced by the Surovikin, the ex-head of special military operation. Sergei Surovikin was head of special military operation in the autumn of the previous year, and under the control of that person, the Russians, if you remember, I'll remind you, moved their forces from Kherson area to the Russian side of bank of the Dnipro River. Furthermore, under his control, the Russians built this defense line, Surovikin defense line, and also under the control of Surovikin, the Russians started bombing and shelling and making missile attacks against the Ukraine energy facilities. So according to information we have, this person will replace Valery Gerasimov on his position. Now let's start with the ground, and first we're going to talk about Kherson area, because finally we got some updates about this territory. The Russians reported that as a result of artillery duels, they destroyed the ammo depot of 126th Brigade. This is the brigade. This brigade is located in the area between Novokakhovka area and all over this bank, right to, let's say, even Sokorovka, I believe so. Furthermore, a few days ago, we started discussing the Ukrainian bridgehead on this side of Dnipro River, and today the Russians published the video how the Ukrainians were landing on the Russian side of the river. As you can see, few boats were going exactly to Antonov bridge, and as a result of that, they managed to move some troopers, some forces on this bank. And basically, this video confirms that as a result of fierce fightings and small storming operation, special operation, the Ukrainians did manage to cross Dnipro River and did manage to establish the bridgehead on this territory. Probably the piece of information about the tanks that were moved on this bridgehead is incorrect. So basically, for now, the Ukrainians do control this part of Dnipro River and this part of Antonov Bridge. The Russian sources are saying that during the previous day they made few attempts to counterattack, but all the Russian attempts were repelled, and basically the Russians were forced to step back. And basically, this territory in the vicinity of Antonov Bridge is under Ukrainian control. So that wasn't the fake information, that was truth. We need to wait more. We need to understand whether the Ukrainians are able to hold this bridgehead, or they will be forced to step back, or they will be destroyed under Russian fire. The Minister of Defense reported that during the previous 24 hours, as a result of fierce fightings, artillery duels, and so on, the Ukrainians lost 50 soldiers, 2 armored vehicles, and 1 artillery system M777 howitzer. Now we're moving to the Vremievka, to the Zaporozhye area, to the Vremievka tactical bridgehead, to Petykhatki. The Ukrainians continue accumulation of their forces in the vicinity of Petykhatki, but without any attempts to attack. Now they wait. The Russian sources are saying that Ukrainians are planning to restart or relaunch their attack somewhere on the 28th, 27th of June. For now, they're doing like accumulation process, trying to get as much as possible forces, trying to accumulate probably blood, trying to prepare themselves before another suicide operation on this bridgehead. When talking about Bradley Square, the Russians published a video how they were bombing and shelling the Ukrainian positions in the vicinity of Mala Takmachka, Novodanilovka, Orechov. As you can see, there's a very fierce fightings, very fierce artillery duels. I can't even imagine what exactly can survive under such a heavy fire from the Russian side. As you can see, there are a lot of explosions on this video, a lot of attacks, a lot of missile launches and so on. So basically the Russians continue holding this bridgehead. From the other side, we know that Ukrainians, as a result of fightings during the previous days, managed to penetrate the first defense belt of the Russians in the vicinity in the area between Novodanilovka and Robotina, and currently they entered this first defense line, at least somewhere here on the road. Basically, they have returned the positions that they lost during the previous counter-offensive operation from the Russian side, and they continue accumulating their forces. And one more time, according to the Russian sources, the Ukrainians are planning to restore and restart their attempts to attack the north of Robotina on the 27th and 28th of June, these dates. Now we are moving further to the Vremievka tactical bridgehead. The situation is very difficult, but for the Ukrainians, the Russians reported that they repelled another attack in the vicinity of Peryutina. There was like few attacks in this direction, all of them were repelled. Furthermore, the Russians published the video how the Ukrainians were trying to supply and support their forces in Makarova. Makarova is the settlement that located on the lowland, this one, and basically the Ukrainians have just one possibility is to support the settlement using this road. Currently, this is another living road for the Ukrainians. And this road, of course, is located in the lowland, and the Russians control the hills on the west. And of course, the Russians do have perfect visible control or fire control. And as you can see in this video, the Ukrainians were trying to send some armored fist, few tanks, few armored vehicles, small convoy, and they're doing this every day because they need to supply and support this media victory, this useless settlement. They need to keep control over this useless settlement, and the only possible solution for them is to send endless waves of vehicles to this settlement. The Russians see everything, and the Russians, of course, do a lot of fire. As you can see in this video, there was an explosion right in front of tank, or probably one of the tank was destroyed. On this video we see how the tank was destroyed. So basically the Ukrainians did manage to capture the settlement, but basically they captured the trap, they captured the artillery back, and they appeared. Currently they're located in artillery back, and they're under 24 hours fire. And I'm not sure that this is like things that worse, this Makarova worst losses Ukrainians have every day. So as you can see, they can't even bypass this road, and they were forced to stop, and basically either they were forced to return, or they were left these vehicles on the road, and that's it. The Russians reported that as a result of those fierce fightings in the vicinity of Orechov, on the Bradley Square and the Vremievka tactical bridgehead, the Ukrainians lost 170 soldiers, 8 armored vehicles, including 1 tank and 5 artillery systems. Now we're moving further to Furthermore, the Ministry of Defense, as always, published another series of videos how they're using their helicopters, and using helicopters were attacking the Ukrainian positions, somewhere in Zaporozhye and somewhere in the vicinity of Bradley Square. A lot of new videos. Almost every single day, more and more armored vehicles are destroyed by the Russian helicopters, by their rockets, by their missile systems Tugna. This perfect weapon. As you can see, all these videos was made during the night. These helicopters have a perfect night vision system, and they can coordinate and target any type of weapon vehicles that Ukrainians currently have. I'll remind you that most of the helicopters are located on the airport in Berdyansk, and the Russians send them to the east in direction of Bradley Square and Petykhatki, and of course to the north in direction of the Vremievka tactical bridgehead. When talking about Donetsk, the Russians reported they repelled the Ukrainians' attacks in the vicinity of Mariinka. As usual, the same situation, the same stories, without any progress both sides. The Russians repelled Ukrainian attacks in the vicinity of Pervomaiska. The Russians repelled Ukrainians' attempts to attack the Russian positions in Oputna from Avdiivka. And of course, as usual, the Russians repelled Ukrainians' attack from Keramik in direction of the small settlement Krasnogorovka. All those attacks were repelled. Also, the Russians destroyed the ammo depot 110th mechanized brigade in the vicinity of Avdiivka. This is the brigade 110th. The total losses of the Ukrainians were around 430 soldiers, 21 armored vehicles, and 1 artillery system. As you can see, the losses are very heavy. And mainly, the level of losses is connected with the situation with Prigozhin that took place yesterday, because the Ukrainians thought and believed that the situation in Russia will develop in an unpredictable way, and they tried to try their luck and they're attacked, and basically the level of losses is completely because of attempt to use the situation and so on, because Avdiivka and Donetsk is not the only place where the Ukrainians were trying to attack. The Russians report they managed to repel around 10 attacks in the vicinity of Artyomovsk. Furthermore, according to some sources, the Ukrainians did have possibilities to develop some bridgehead in the vicinity of Kurdyumovka. They captured the channel, and currently the entire bank of the channel, the western bank, is under complete Ukrainian control. Furthermore, some sources are saying that Ukrainians captured fortifications on the north of Kurdyumovka. If you ask my opinion, I believe this is fake information. The Ukrainians haven't established control over the trenches over the fortifications on the north of Klishchiivka. Also, the Ukrainians were trying to attack in direction of Yahidne. That attack was repelled by the Russians, and also the Russians from this area published the video of trenches, and it's a picture of living road on this bridgehead. It's very difficult to see, but anyways, you consider a lot of destroyed armored vehicles, a lot of destroyed vehicles along this road, and there are a lot of trenches and something like moon picture of moon on this territory. And furthermore, the Russians published another video how they were bombing and shelling the Ukrainian positions on the south in the forest of Vremievka water reservoir, using drones, using artilleries, and using all type of weapon they have, trying to slow down and stop the Ukrainians in their advancing in direction of Berkhovka and Yahidne. Also, the Ukrainians made some attempts to attack the Russians from Orekhovo-Vasilievka in direction of Dubovo-Vasilievka and from in direction of Zaliznyanska. All those attacks were repelled by the Russians as well. Now we're moving to Severodonetsk-Liman front line. There are not many updates. During the previous 24 hours, the Ukrainians made few attacks of the Russian positions in the vicinity in this area. In the vicinity of this small salient, the Ukrainians were trying to attack the Russians in the vicinity of Dibrova. All those attacks were repelled by the Russians, and also the Russians attacked the Ukrainian reserves in the vicinity of Dibrova, 63rd, 67th Mechanized Brigade, and also they attacked the Ukrainians in Nevska, the same force, 63rd and 67th Mechanized Brigade. And as we can see, there are no changes on the ground, but the level of loss is very heavy. The Russians are saying that as a result of fierce fightings, the Ukrainians lost 130 soldiers, 5 armored vehicles, and 3 artillery systems on this bridgehead. Now we are moving to the most important, the most interesting part of the previous 24 hours. We are going to talk about Kupyansk front line. The Russians published a video how they destroyed another ammo depot somewhere in the Kupyansk front line. This icon is not geolocated. The explosion took place somewhere in the Kupyansk front line. As you can see, it was a very heavy explosion. The Russians managed to discover and destroy ammo depot. The total losses of the Ukrainians, according to the Ministry of Defense, is not so heavy, just 25 soldiers, but according to some sources and officers on the ground, the Russians managed to develop their bridgehead in the vicinity of Kupyansk. And as we discussed a few days ago, the Russians captured Sinkovka. At least some sources are saying this. And furthermore, we got some kind of map from the soldier on the ground, from this situation on the ground, that the Russians either captured Sinkovka, and also the Russians managed to develop their bridgehead in the vicinity of Sinkovka on the eastern side of Sinkovka. So basically, this is the current situation in this area. The Russians managed to develop their bridgehead also in the fields between Pershatravneva and Sinkovka. But this is not the most important part. The thing is that, if you remember, a few days ago we discussed that there was a talk. There was a piece of information that the Russians managed to cross Oskol River in third place and to develop the bridgehead somewhere else, not on the south of Dvorechna and not in the vicinity of Novomlinsk. There was a third area, and we didn't have any information about any piece of information where exactly the Russians managed to do this. And basically this map shows us the proximate area of that attack. As you can see, this is Sinkovka. This where you see the arrows is the arrows of Russian attack in direction of Sinkovka and in direction of the settlement that located on the south, this one Petropavlovka. But there is another interesting piece of information. On the west side of this red cloud there is a river Oskol, and this is the bridgehead, and this is the area where the Russians managed to cross the river. So basically on this map, and this is the perfect, as you can see, this part of river is not straight, it's letter S, like a letter dollar. So it's very difficult to build a pontoon bridge in this territory, but this part of Oskol River is the perfect area to create a bridgehead. There is a road among the trees. The Russians do have possibilities to send some tanks and so on. So basically, as a result of fierce fightings, the Russians managed to cross the river on this territory, capture this forest, and to create this bridge. So basically, the Russians have 3 bridgeheads in the vicinity of Kupyansk. The first one on the north of Kupyansk, in the vicinity of Golubovka and Radkovka. The second bridgehead the Russians have on the south of Dvorechno, this one, and the third bridgehead the Russians has in the settlement by the name of Novomlinsk. So, if you ask me, I see that everything is ready to begin the offensive operation in Kupyansk. The Russians, of course, will try to attack Figolovka and the northern part of Dvorechno, trying to cut these roads and these supply areas. The second attack is going to be in the middle between this bridgehead and on the south of Dvorechno, and of course to the west in direction of Zaporozhye to cut supply roads. And from this bridgehead, the Russians need, of course, few days to create normal like fortifications, to build trenches, to establish supply road, to move some tanks in forest, to hide them, and so on. And after that, the Russians will try to develop their bridgehead, of course, to the south in direction of Golubovka. They need a settlement for these purposes, not just the forest, but just the normal settlements where they can hide. The Russians will attack this industrial zone to the west, this one. The Russians will attack the forest that located on the northwest, this one. And of course, they will try to cut the Ukrainian supply and their forces in Kindrashevka. And after that, the Russians will turn to the south and they will start offensive operation of the western part of Kupyansk. The Russians have a lot of options how to take Kupyansk. I believe they don't want to destroy or ruin the settlement as Prigozhin did in Bakhmut and Artyomovsk, and if they will attack Kupyansk from the east, like from Sinkovka and Petropavlovka, of course they will be forced to ruin this settlement. But if the Russians will try to encircle Kupyansk from the north, from Dvorechno, from Zaporozhye, from this bridgehead, then they will be able to save the settlement, to cut supply roads like along this red line, to encircle the forces inside of there and to force them to step back to the south in direction of, let's say, like Barova, like Liman, let's say, in direction of Liman. So basically this is the plan. I'll remind you that from the Ukrainian side there are forces of 14th Mechanized Brigade that have been located here since maybe the autumn of the previous year. There is a newly redeployed 88th Mechanized Brigade, there are Rocket Artillery Brigade, there are Kraken Special Forces, there are forces of 92nd Mechanized Brigade. On the north there are forces of 101st Brigade for the protection of General Staff, there is 105th Defense Brigade, and there is a 15th Artillery Brigade in the vicinity of Kharkiv and so on. So basically we see that step by step the Russians launch their offensive operation in direction of Kupyansk. And there are a lot of reasons to do this, and the first one is that the Russians half a year ago promised the citizens of this area that they will be with the Russians and that the Russians are not going to leave. During the autumn, previously they were forced to run away from these positions. Currently they need to restore them. And the second main reason is that there is a very important railroad that goes from the mainland to Liman, then to Artyomov. So it's a very important logistical hub, very important economical part of this region that needed to be under Russian control if they want to develop this region successfully, no matter the situation in the future. And furthermore, of course, if we are going to talk anywhere, any day about the offensive operation of Slavyansk and Kramatorsk, the Russians need to return control over this part of Ukraine as well. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.